One of the pleasures of being able to work in the rewilding space is there's a lot of other places where you can't walk out into the middle of your work and just stop for a second, sit down on the grass, and either close your eyes or pick up your binoculars and get rejuvenated by just stopping. And you can in rewilding, so I have the great privilege to be able to go out and visit the work and get out of the truck and walk around. And you go up on a ridge and sit somewhere and look. And I think that's a really, really important thing, is stop and go, look what we've done so far. And I honestly have had so many hundreds of those moments, I can't even begin to count them all.
You're listening to the Rewilding Earth podcast. I'm your host, Jack Humphrey. If we're serious about hitting global goals like 30 by 30 or 50 by 50, we have to realize that public lands are only part of the solution. Reaching that scale requires a massive lift from wildlands philanthropy and a radical approach to private lands. We can all agree we need to move faster and we need to look beyond the park boundaries. My guest today, Sean Gerrity, has been at the center of this shift for 2 decades. As the former CEO of American Prairie, Sean helped lead one of the most ambitious private lands projects in history. They didn't wait for a mandate, they built the engine to do it themselves. Sean's new book, Wild on Purpose, The American Prairie Story and the Art of Thinking Bigger, is a blueprint for hitting rewilding targets at scale. If you want to understand how private philanthropy is a key factor in reaching our global goals, this conversation is definitely for you. I start by asking Sean to give us the starting point for American Prairie, the massive 3.2 million acre reserve complex in Montana.
Well, it started long before I came along. This was not our idea, really key. And I think that in some ways makes it easy to take somebody else's idea that for some reason has not been able to get traction, try to figure out the idea is fabulous. How do we make it get traction? How can we get this thing going? Because obviously a lot of people have tried, but it just haven't succeeded yet. And really good meaning people who put in a long time. So you probably heard before, probably the first person who's ever mentioned the idea of this was an artist named George Catlin, painted out here in the 1830s in this particular region, went back to Congress and said, you wouldn't believe what's out there, particularly the landscape, the wildlife phenomenon is like nothing else he's ever seen. He traveled all over the United States. He said, we ought to make it a nation's park before it's all gone. People were starting to trap beavers and things. He could see the demise coming. It was in 1836. Didn't happen, obviously, but that idea was passed down like a rugby ball through the generations, and different people tried, even up into the 1980s, with a guy named Bob Scott, and what he called the Big Open. He was shooting for a 5 million acre reserve, very similar to what American Prairie hoped to do later, even though there was no American Prairie at the time. And that got too much pushback. It was a little bit too early. Timing's everything, huge pushback from the livestock industry. Even though he had a lot of supporters in other places around the country. He let that go in the 90s. But eventually people kept, scientists saying, if you were to do something like this, we passed over this possibility when we made the national parks. If you do something like this in the grasslands, this is probably one of the best places in the lower 48 states to do it. And Nature Conservancy proved that with a very thorough study in the mid-1990s saying, here's 10 places it could happen. This one floats to the top all the time. So that confirmed it was a good idea, but they didn't move on it. Where Wildlife Fund said, let's try to figure out how to do it. And particularly, what kind of structure would we need? Because this entity, whatever it is going to have to tuck in for a long, long time, like decades, many decades to get the thing done. So that was the idea. An organization needed to be started. I happened totally by accident to run into some of the people who were trying to figure this out. We got cooking together on it, and it's turned out to be a separate entity would be the smartest thing to do, not a part of some of the big dogs in conservation like CI and, TNC and WCS and or wildlife fund, et cetera, make it a freestanding entity that could live no matter what happened to the strategic planning processes or the priorities of those big organizations, which change and morph all the time. So that got started, and they needed someone to run it. And they said, Sean, you've helped start a lot of businesses and help businesses get unstuck all around the world in your previous job. How about you be interim CEO and then just for a little while? And you could then, from having sat in the chair and run it for 6 months or whatever, you'd know what we need in terms of an ED or a CEO or president or whatnot. We could do a national search. And then I started liking it once I was in there doing that. And then I couldn't imagine giving it up. And then things just got out of hand from there.
I love going to a business guy. Like, that's not the typical play. But somebody recognized that that would probably be a really important thing to do. And they were right, I think, because you talk a lot about over the years how you look at things and problems and solutions differently. I recognized working in organizations that didn't have that skill set at the top level, the difference. And it's difficult. So bravo to the person who invited you in as interim. I think that was funny too. That's always how they get you, Sean.
Yeah.
Like, you're just an interim.
Yeah, that was the clever ploy of my very good friend, Dr. Kurt Frazee.
Yeah.
He's smart in lots of ways, and he knows how to suck people in like that too. The most difficult thing is Kurt's the kind of guy because of his character, his integrity, his knowledge. You just want to have a chance to work around him, and he's got that. He's not this big charismatic type person. He's just the kind of person you'd like to have in your life, and so you get sucked into that, and then it's really hard to extract yourself from that gravitational force. Anyway. And you realize, okay, just one step at a time, and pretty soon you're in, kind of deal. But the key thing I would say, I want to agree with you about bringing some business acumen to the situation. I'm not going to deny that. That is key. Setting things up, so making sure everybody understands a shared vision, everybody understands the core values of the organization. If you don't like our values, go work someplace else, kind of thing. What our purpose and our mission is, and then attitude of constant innovation. We don't always have the right idea, but we look around the world for other places where people are ahead of us, and we bring those ideas home and implement them here. Believing that the answers we need are somewhere, and search relentlessly for those to solve our particular problems, go get them and bring them back. That's still a part of you're building a culture when you do that, a way of operating. And also setting things up such that when the founder leaves, doesn't mean the organization implodes. How do you set things up so it keeps cooking for decades, long after my working lifetime? 6 years, I'm out from that role after 18 years of doing it. It's proving it's stronger every single year. It's so much better than when I was running it. It just keeps getting better because of that continuous improvement idea. But in addition to I would like to speak to some young folks out there. You don't have to have 18 years of for-profit business experience working around the world in organization development consulting like me. What is as important, I think, what is as important is a lot about moving people to a new idea. And in this case, to consider the possibility of a different kind of relationship with nature. That Homo sapiens, us, the people, having a different kind of relationship with nature than we have now. And how to get that across so it slowly is allowed to be discussed and thought about and pondered and turned over in the different lights until you can start to see a new way of looking at our relationship to nature. That's all about psychology and sociology. That's not business. So I think my comment, and I also traveled a lot around the world and got perspective getting out of the United States and turning around from 10,000 miles in somewhere in Southeast Asia or wherever else I was, and looking back at this country and how it operates as a culture, and how are we going to do this here in this country? Because it's tough, it's contentious. Everybody's got an idea about why you shouldn't be doing what you're doing. We're experts at stopping things, not so great at starting things. So how do you be persistent and stick with it over all the rocks you're going to take from people throwing rocks at you from the sidelines in terms of criticism, trying to stop you, trying to say how you're doing it's wrong? It never goes away. It's still happening today, 25 years later, nonstop. People pitching rocks at you. So how do you just keep smiling, moving forward, calmly, taking the long view, That's not necessarily a business attitude. That's more a liberal arts education, helping to think about people and how society moves over the long term. So you don't need as much business background as you might think. So
Well, you pointed to it here, so I might as well ask you about the 20-60-20 rule. And because I think that points directly to how do you stay on track? How do you stay when people are throwing rocks at you on track and not get bummed out and not let them take over a discussion that's being had by a larger group of people, that 60%? How does all that work?
well, I'd suggest to people to get themselves ready to be involved in something like this and not feel beaten down by that phenomenon you're describing. Take a look at other really bold yet very important things that have happened in history, and it'll make you feel like your problems are pretty small, like American Prairie. In the book, I mentioned a great one is the women's suffrage movement in the United States. This big conference in Seneca, New York. It was about 1850 or 1849. We gathered together talking about women's rights. One of those things was the ability to vote. Should be able to vote, shouldn't we? And for the next 30 years, there was a lot of people very much against that. And the people who started it, 3 or 4 women who started this whole idea on the voting track, trying to get women to vote, they never saw it in the end of their lifetimes, but they made a lot of progress and they turned a lot of hearts and minds, even though they're taking huge amounts of hits that women should not. That's what in life as we know it, if we let women vote. And starting in 1850, it wasn't until the early 1960s with the Voting Rights Act in the US where all women of all races in all states had the right to vote. That's indigenous people, black women, everything, white women got it in like the 1920s. But for all women everywhere, well over 100 years. And now I think there's probably, me included, the two of us for sure, we're glad that happened. Some women stuck it out and they had death threats. It was bad, right? So if you look in history, this has happened time and time again with really important things that we're all glad did happen and someone stuck through it, although we don't remember a lot of their names. So you got to look at it like that. So then you get down into the technicality of change on large human scales. And the model you're talking about here, the guy named Michael Hammer, who was a societal change specialist. And he said, anytime you're going to recommend something like, women's right to vote or the American Prairie concept, it's funny how quickly recipients of that message sift into three kind of distinguishable categories. Of course, it's never this black and white, but about 20% of the people, even before you finish your pitch of what it is you want to do and why, are already with you. They've just been waiting for someone like you to come along and say this is important. And this happened with American Prairie. It really did. They didn't make it to the news much, but right away we start talking about it in Lewistown and other places. And there are some people that just love the idea. Finally, someone wants to bring back this wildlife abundance that we all knew used to be there. And on the other hand, there's often 20% of people on the other end of the spectrum that before you finish talking about it, they hate it already. Here's 100 reasons why I don't like what you're doing, and I hope you will just fail and go away. And then there's 60% though in the middle who are going, interesting. Some parts are intriguing. I don't know if you have the ability to execute on this idea you're promoting. And I'm not sure what it's going to do to our community. Is going to tear us apart and create divisiveness. There's aspects I like, but I'm going to wait and see. That's 60% at the middle. So 20% you're preaching to the choir on the right. On the other hand, there's people who are really hoping they're just ruining the day when you will stop and give up on this idea. So when you're trying to change things, you have to settle in for the long haul and work on that 60% in the middle, not continuing to hammer them with the message and sell them and sell them and sell them. Just simply, with our situation, just do what we said we were going to do over and over and over, year after year after year. So that is, allow people onto our private land. You won't see a keep out sign on our hundreds of miles of remaining fence that's there, but soon will be coming down. You will see an open welcome invitation to visit our private lands. You'll never see us use our private lands to block access to public lands. We allow all these different kinds of recreation, whether it's birding or mountain biking or camping or, catching pollinators and butterflies or whatever you want to do, hunting in some areas. We've done what we said we were going to do year after year after year, and nothing has changed in 25 years. That 60%, part of what moves them is just trust that you do what you say. And it's you're trusted to stick with your mission. So they can go to your website and go, this is really them. You go on their website, that's it. I've seen it. That's really helpful. But then also doing things that they pointing out, here are some of the benefits. Here are people who have started businesses in the region because we now exist, bird watching tours, all kinds of things. That we're not going to leave anybody behind. We don't want, it's not going to be a win-lose. We're battling against some evil entity and we're gonna pin them to the mat kind of thing. It's where we want everyone to win who's here now. So our Wild Sky Rancher program, which we started 10 years ago, I was all excited when we got 6 ranchers signed up. It seemed like proof of concept. They go, man, this could work. And we got that idea from Botswana and Namibia, by the way. We didn't think of it ourselves. And the Northern Jaguar Project in Mexico. A part of it is from there. But now there's 21 fairly large scale ranching families that are involved in our Wild Sky Ranching program, basically associating with us, in business with us, getting paid to be more biodiversity, nature, and wildlife friendly in the way that they do their ranching operations. That's so even out in the ecosystem surrounding the eventual core reserve, there's people that are already benefiting from it, and we're decades away from being totally finished. And so we did that, trying to help people, school kids with our school programs, our education programs, et cetera. So that's how that thing works, is understanding. Don't try to talk to the 20% that are really against it. Spend your time in the 60 that are open to influence over time. And it's not through salesmanship, it's through doing what you say you're going to do.
I think that I'm getting a picture here looking at talks you've done in the past and the book and other things that you have always done a good job of making sure that people are really grounded and have perspective. And I remember a Google talk that I saw you do 10 years ago or so, where you also put into great perspective the expense that we were talking about, because people don't understand the numbers right off the bat when you're talking about large land acquisitions. And you talked about back then, like 2016 or so, there were like 3 football stadiums that were being built.
Yeah, I actually thought of this analogy on a plane flight home from Dallas, Texas one time. Of course, I was out on the road trying to find some money to keep the enterprise going. And the numbers were daunting to me. I just tried not to think about it too much, how much the whole thing is going to cost.
So was this a self-preservation thing in the very, very beginning? Like, how do I put this into perspective?
Yes.
What I'm trying to do?
Kind of like when you're remodeling your house and things are going haywire and sideways. It's going to cost a lot more than you thought, and just, oh my gosh, and you can't back up. You got to finish your remodel. It's one of those things. And so the budget was not being blown out of sight, but we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. And when I started, I'd never fundraised in my life. I had to read books and listen to people and try to figure out how to fundraise from scratch. Not a great, I wouldn't recommend that for starting a nonprofit. But that's all I had with our group, the team of us, a small team of 3 or 4 of us. And so the numbers, yeah, were daunting to me, and I tried to find an analogy for myself that puts it in perspective, like the voting rights for women thing that made me feel better about how long it might take us to get our vision done. So I was working with a guy named Bill Lively. He had helped raise money for the new Dallas Cowboys football stadium, and I asked him, Bill, I don't know how much that thing costs. He said, really, all in is going to be about $1.3 billion. And I started thinking about that. And they raised that in 2.5 years and built the thing and started playing games in 2.5 years. Unbelievable. So I started looking around and realized, wow, the Minnesota Vikings, because their roof collapsed, they're building another one. The Atlanta Falcons, same thing. LA, just a couple of years later, really amazing situation there. Las Vegas. We build these football stadiums all the time. Today, the average price is edging closer to $2 billion all in for a football stadium. So I said, we're going to build the largest, in comparison, we're going to build the largest wildlife complex refuge ever assembled in the lower 48 states, bigger than Yellowstone Park and Glacier Park combined. Restore all, as much as we possibly can, the historic wildlife, open it up for public enjoyment, and save it for future generations. And it's going to be far less than the price of one new football stadium. And football stadiums last about 30 years, then they dynamite them and they build another one.
Hmm.
So this thing's going to be built to last for hundreds of years in the future. To me, man, that's cheap. If we just got to find the right people who get enthused about this kind of vision and create a path of least resistance from their financial resources to our need, and we should be good. That's how I put it together in my mind. And as far as the cost, it's nothing. A second example is I visited someone, just an absolutely delightful woman. Her name is Susan Packard Orr. She's from the Packard Foundation. She lives in Palo Alto, California, on the Stanford campus there. And I went down to visit her, and she said, "How are things going?" And I said, "Sometimes I stop, and when I wake up and I realize how much money we need to raise to do this, it kind of makes me sweat." And she goes, "Sean, my mom, she's gone now, but we're naming a new wing of her hospital, the Lucille Children's Hospital. It's kind of like St. Jude's. It's in the Bay Area." Uh, and she said, "We're going to build a new wing on the hospital, just a wing, just to upgrade it. You know how much that wing is going to cost?" I said, "I don't have any idea." She said, $650 million for one wing of one hospital that you've never heard of.
Hmm.
She said, "Don't worry about the money. Just quit whining and get back after it. Fundraise and build the thing." So I guess people would help me out with, if it's important, you'll find it. So
That framing is so freeing. I can feel it just with you talking about it now, and being in the nonprofit business for so long.
yeah.
Fundraising talks are not usually cheerful experiences, and it's mainly because we lose
Yeah.
our frame of reference on what's expensive, what costs a lot, because of the size of our organization. And it's like fish in a fish tank. They get as big as the tank will let them, and if you put
Yeah.
them in a bigger tank, they'll grow more. But if you don't, they stay. And a lot of organizations are like fish tanks that never get replaced with a bigger fish tank.
Yeah, I just wanted anybody who's young and thinking about getting involved in helping to move the world to a better place as far as nature and biodiversity and wildlife is you gotta sweat the money for sure. It's like anything. There's 6 or 7 big critical success factors to building an organization for resiliency and forward movement and continuous accomplishment and good execution, for sure. And having the funds is a big deal. A lot of organizations just our CEO raised the money. We'll build a fundraising army later, which I think is a huge mistake. You need your capacity inside your organization because that CEO may go somewhere else, get hired away, get hit by a bus, something, and now you're very fragile. You have to have that that transcends anybody who comes and goes in the organization. So most organizations wait too long to do it, to build really strong capacity. American Prairies is incredibly impressive, much bigger and more competent than when I was running the organization. Ali Fox has done a stellar job, and Sam and all the people in that organization there. Just watching them now from far is astounding. It's really cool. But they focused on it. They just thought it was a priority. But I think the main thing is don't get too wigged out by the cost of what something might be, because the money is out there. Your challenge is not to dig around in a finite pie and battle with other people like a bunch of coyotes and ravens over some dead carcass in Yellowstone. You just want to go get a little bite. It's out there. Your challenge is they are spending lots of money on things that are important to them. All kinds of things. Football stadiums, or the roof of Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris burns down. The money appeared, millions. It just appeared like in no time to rebuild that thing. And you realize that's because people think it's important. So your challenge, doesn't matter what you're doing in this arena we're talking about, it's up to you. Stop complaining and figure out, how do you help people understand how incredibly important your thing is. Once you convince people of importance, how important it is, the money begins to move in your direction continuously, year after year after year. Your project becomes one of the biggest, most satisfying, comforting things in their life. They want to go on this ride with you. And it's not just wildlife, people. Some of our biggest donors don't really care that much about wildlife. What they care about is people in America realizing that big things can still get done in all this contention. They just love the idea of big ideas executed well, taken to completion. That's where some of our biggest donors give to it for, not because they like prairie dogs or bison. I think that's great. So the better you are at making your thing seem important, the broader your potential donor base becomes. I believe in possibilities, and then we need to look at the same thing that everybody else is looking at and see something different, see the possibilities in that situation or that set of conditions. And then if they're there, it's up to us to click into the mindset of innovation. And innovation, just like this project itself, creativity is thinking of the original idea in the first place, something nobody else would have thought of. That's creativity. Innovation is taking an idea and making it work. That's mostly what this whole nature saving thing is. The ideas are laying around all over the place and what you can do. Like American Prairie started in 1836. Nobody could figure out how to do it. Our mindset was innovation, which is very different than creativity. I'm an artist too. I paint oils and watercolors, so I get the whole creative process. I'm not against creativity, but innovation is what makes things move. Taking ideas and figuring out how to move the pieces around on the table until you finally get them to fit, and just sticking with it and not getting bored and frustrated, sticking with it until you find some pieces to fit. Get excited, do a high five because we got that, and now we got to get a few more pieces to fit, and just keep problem solving and knowing that if we stick with this long enough, we're going to figure this out. If we can't, we're going to go find somebody else who can. They'll come in and go, yeah, you guys looking at it all wrong, and they fix it. And, we high five with them. Who cares who solves it? Just that it gets solved and you can move forward incrementally towards your vision.
It's difficult in this day and age to keep perspective. At the same time, we have all the information in the world at our fingertips, but you have to look for it.
Yeah. A lot of people are railing against the phone and how it's hard not to look at that car wreck, the doom scrolling. And I think about, if you looked at my Instagram feed, you can't doom scroll. I could hand it to you. You can spend 2 hours on it. What you're going to see is watercolor artists, oils. You're going to see positive stories like Chris Tompkins type stories of rewilding or Rewilding Europe or James Shooter's podcast or whatever. More stories that I could possibly keep up with or listen to in the rest of my lifetime. I also watch dancers. I follow some authors when they have new books out. The whole thing, when I look at my Instagram feed, it makes me feel better. It's actually a break from the day. It doesn't bring me down because I've canceled out. I don't follow disasters. I know exactly how much ice is melting in the Antarctic and how fast things are going with global warming. I've been to so many conferences, I don't need to go anymore. I don't need to see that to remind myself and saturate myself in that news. So I'm not sticking my head in the sand. You can take that tool and you can curate what you want on Instagram. I can spend 2 hours and there's nothing depressing on it. It's all about digging out of a funk if I get in that because something's happened, or like our recent BLM decision, with our grazing allotments and all that stuff. It ends up being a reprieve as opposed to something that sinks me down emotionally. You can control that. You can also go out looking, open up your laptop or whatever and start hitting links or ask AI, give me 20 examples. Or for instance, recently with the whole idea of, hitting 20 by 30, give me 10 examples of the top 10 countries who are doing the best with that. Boom. And give me two paragraphs on why you're saying they are going to hit that target or they're already at that target, which is pretty cool because it's only 2026. And you hear about Costa Rica, Bhutan, Namibia, Greece, France, Canada, Chile, United Kingdom, New Zealand, Colombia, on and on and on. They're all going to arrive and have done their bit to get to 2030. So are some states like California. You can download this huge document called Pathways to 2030. Produced by the state of California, and the projects going on are fascinating. I mean, sit down and read that for an afternoon, and you go, you know what? There's people out there that are just getting after it, like the people at American Prairie today. I'm not working there, so I'm talking about them, not me. Mm. And see, all of a sudden you realize you can quickly become overwhelmed with good news. Like I just read you about all those countries that are going to show up and say, when you're doing the tally of 2030, did we make it? Here's our stuff. And people are going to cheer because they did a great job. They worked really hard on changing their societies to a better relationship with nature. But you have to go out and that's a great way to use AI as opposed to being afraid of AI. Make it do the work for you and then justify its work. Like, where did you get that information? You show me the citations, of course. That's helpful. But you have the tools you have these days as young people as compared to what was around 25 years ago. It's just mind blowing. What a great age to live in. What a great age to start something.
As a result of starting something pretty darn significant, can you tell me about one of the most profound moments? What's an experience you can convey that made it absolutely for certain worth it, every bit of it?
One of the pleasures of being able to work in the rewilding space is there's a lot of other places where you can't walk out into the middle of your work and just stop for a second, sit down on the grass, and either close your eyes or pick up your binoculars and get rejuvenated by just stopping. And you can in rewilding. So I have the great privilege to be able to go out and visit the work and get out of the truck and walk around. And you go up on a ridge and sit somewhere and look. And I think that's a really, really important thing is stop and go, look what we've done so far. And I honestly have had so many hundreds of those moments, I can't even begin to count them all. But I could spend the rest of the, couple of hours just one after another. But if as some examples, every time we are able to acquire a property, and we've done 48 of these, now totally over 606,000 acres, something like that, over 600,000 acres in combined private and leased land. And very soon afterwards, after we closed on the property, getting out and walking around it and finding a high spot and just sitting down with the maps in my lap, because you usually can't see to the edge of the property, because sometimes, like the last one we just closed on in the fall, it's 106 square miles, 65,000 acres. So it's oftentimes you can't see to the edge because it's so far out, even on a high spot. So I sit there with maps in my lap and turn them around with the compass on my phone, getting my bearings and looking at it and just sit there and just listen to the breeze, watch, a ferruginous hawk fly by, look down and maybe see, some prairie dogs or something. If you're really lucky, maybe you'll see a deer or something, or, 4 or 5 pronghorn in the far distance or whatever. And you sit and realize now we get to start to move this property in the direction of what it looks like in our vision, which is extraordinarily rich habitat and has a high carrying capacity for all kinds of wildlife, including microbes in the soil, pollinators, reptiles, all the way up to grizzly bears. And what an amazing thing to do that in preparation for leaving it for future generations so they can sit in this spot that I'm at and enjoy wildlife abundance and what it used to be like for thousands of years. And to realize at some point, some friends of ours from Fort Belknap Reservation, down the Dakota and Ahwahnee tribes, some set of them, maybe even one, will come and sit and look at this and realize it's coming back. What we've been lamenting the loss of for more than 150 years is coming back bit by bit. So knowing that at some point I'll be able to stand there with one or more of them, and they just look at it and go, damn, we've been waiting a long time. That's coming back. That's a pretty good feeling. Simple moments like that, I think I've done that so many times. I mean, hundreds of times when I'm feeling down or really tired of fundraising, being able to go out there and be around somebody else and they go, gosh, I haven't been here for 4 years. Look what you guys have done after 4 years. And I go, yeah, it kind of all blurs together. I kind of forget that. And they name this and this and this, whatever it is. And realizing people are watching this and they're going, how do you guys do it year after year, this incremental progress? And the fact that somebody else sees it and recognizes that is really gratifying.
That was a purposeful question for people who are getting ready or deciding to take up the challenge of their lives, at least one of the challenges of their lives, and whether it's all going to be worth it. Whether if I make the world in a way that I envision it, and I'm constantly fighting on a canvas that's not quite there yet, and I have to find a way to sustain myself along the way to get there, and with a lot of things being thrown at me, is it going to be worth it for me to make this choice? I'm thinking about my kid who's in wildlife biology right now at Ball State, and his friends and everybody who are just trying to go, what do I want to do? I mean, this looks almost impossible from the outside. If you look at American Prairie all by itself, and for the first time especially, how in the world Could I ever be a meaningful part of something like that?
I like this question. It's really important to see the bigger context and realize that you're inside a bigger movement is very satisfying and calming to me. For instance, in the around 2015 to 2018, a whole lot of books came out all at once that were about it's time to change our relationship to nature. We got to do something. And one that punched through all the noise of a lot of really good books was Ed Wilson's Half Earth. And he said, basically, I'm paraphrasing, the heck with trying to save what's left. Let's get back a huge amount and reestablish a ratio of nature areas and wild areas in the earth to ones that people are living in or exploiting for monetary gain or whatever. About half and half, 50%, called Half Earth. So simple, thin little book. Let's do that. And he gave some ideas on what it would take to move in that direction. Well, people started looking at that and said, that's pretty daunting. But if we broke it down to 30% of the earth by 2030 and 40% of the earth by 2040, we maybe could get to 50% of the earth, like Ed says, by 2050. All right. And then there's this big meeting of the Ecological Congress in 2020, and 190 countries signed up to pursue the first step, 20 by 30. That's amazing that in these times, 190 people, 190 different countries could agree on anything, but they agreed on that to give that a try. And not only that, they agreed on 4 key strategies, because you could pursue 20 different strategies, all trying to get there. And they said, we got to put 20% of our effort into just these few things to get 80% of our big bang for the buck. So that was, we need to rewild everything we can much faster than we're doing now. That's one, on the oceans and terrestrial areas. The second thing is we need to stabilize human population. It's a problem, how fast we're growing. I'm 67 and the human population in the world has doubled in my lifetime from 3.8 billion when I was born in 1958 to coming up on 9 billion now in one person's lifetime. There's costs to that. The third thing is to accelerate our progress towards green energy. Stop clinging to coal and things that ruin our air, our waterways, and things like that. We know how to do it. It's just deciding to do it, like many countries in Europe have. And the fourth thing, probably the biggest impact of all, if we work on one, is changing agriculture and embracing the idea of ultra high yield, ultra low land use agricultural practices, which there's plenty of examples around the world where people are doing that really, really well. Not so much in North America, but it's starting. So if you realize when you're in rewilding, you're in a bigger picture, that 50 by 2050 frame, year one of 4 top strategies that people are barreling ahead on, and there's good momentum in these. You can Google that yourself and find out there's a lot of inspiring news about that. And then work your way down to, if you want to do rewilding, it's going on all over the world. You don't have to work in the States. There's cool stuff everywhere happening. Be out of the country, out of the US for 2 or 3 or 4 years. No big deal. Learn a lot. Come back here if you want, whatever. But think more expansively about geographical location for yourself. Could be in the South Pacific or whatever. But, so for instance, though, if you find something like I did and our team did with American Prairie, and they're continuing to chug along really nicely on the northern Great Plains in northeastern Montana, where most people in the United States have never been before. Most Montanans have not been up there, and found a place to tuck in and work on something. So this is a really, really important thing. If you're going to decide on rewilding as opposed to green energy or agriculture, which are really good things too, super helpful stuff to move us along, then realize how it's being done is in a quality fashion around the world. Is you think about 3 key things. One is a core area. It does not have to be 3.2 million acres like American Prairie or 5,000 square miles. That's kind of a big frame. But there's bigger ones like in Kazakhstan. But you can do much, much smaller core areas and still have a lot of meaningful benefit to it. But then you have to think about the ecosystem around that, around the eventual core area, 3/4 million acres of American Prairie. You have an ecosystem that's been there for thousands of years, 7-8 million acres. It crosses up into Canada and it exists there. Our Wild Sky Rancher program is meant to help with societal change to those ranchers' benefit. They are paid money and they like being involved. 21 ranchers now, but check back in a couple of years, they will be more than 21. because more people want to get into this program. They're paid to be more wildlife friendly in the way they do their ranching operations. It's working well. So we're trying to work with a social carrying capacity for wildlife surrounding the eventual core reserve. And then there's corridors that connect us to other areas like this. So the Northern Continental Divide, which is anchored mostly by Glacier Park, also the bog marsh wilderness and some other protected areas, it also has a 7 or 8, 9 million acre ecosystem that goes on up into Canada. And then the one down below I'm sitting 45 minutes away from is the I'm sitting in the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. South of me is Yellowstone Park, about an hour away. And so that has a core, it has an ecosystem, but there's corridors that connect all three of these things in what we call the Montana Triangle. Right now, grizzly bears are walking, or have walked, from both the Continental Divide and the greater Yellowstone and have arrived. They are there in the Northern Great Plains ecosystem where American Prairie is. They've been gone for 130 years and they're back. And we didn't bring them in trucks. They walked a couple hundred miles and got themselves back to the grassland, their ancestral home. That's pretty cool. And if you imagine this, if you get my book, you'll see this visually, this Montana Triangle. And this is an example of how it's done around the rest of the world. The core area ecosystem connected to other core areas and ecosystems. Imagine pictures you saw in science in 8th grade of the human brain. And you have a neuron, a brain cell, right? And there's axons and dendrites. And this whole beautiful network is connected because information needs to flow freely and without hindrances or distortion between brain cells to other brain cells to act and operate effectively. And we're modeling that idea. It's absolutely beautiful. I know a neurosurgeon, his name is Amir Vokshor. He says there's nothing so beautiful as looking at a human brain, which he does brain surgery all the time. He says it's absolutely mystical how beautiful it is. That's how I think about rewilding. If you stand back and look at the map like the Montana Triangle, but the same thing's happening in India and lots of different places around the world. Getting connected up like this allows information to flow in the form of wildlife, back like those grizzly bears and other critters, back and forth, and everything remains healthy. Information is moving, like genetic information, to keep things healthy and cooking from an environmental or ecological standpoint. It's a beautiful, elegant thing to look at. It's a work of art. And now you could connect more of these things by having one in Canada, one over in North Dakota, and mountain lions would move back and forth between that one and here, one over in Idaho in the Selkirk or wherever. And you're just building this brain network that can expand indefinitely. And that is a hell of a thing to be a part of. It's really cool. You can also find vocations in working in core areas on wildlife like prairie dogs and bringing back pronghorn and stuff like that. You can work in the ecosystem surrounding the core areas. That's mostly sociology. You can work in the corridors, which is, championing underpasses and overpasses and changes in social attitudes to allow grizzly bears to walk by, that kind of thing. There's all kinds of ways you can find enormously satisfying vocations in this stuff. And what I'm talking about is expanding rapidly all over the world. You can decide what country you work in. It's just layers and layers and layers of opportunity for young people to go say, where do I want to play? Where would I like to fit that would be most satisfying and rewarding to me? It's a hell of a time.
Well, I would recommend Wild on Purpose, The American Prairie Story, and The Art of Thinking Bigger as the next logical link from Dave Foreman's Rewilding North America. It is a contemporary take on what really needs to be done, and you can find out about that on the episode page at rewilding.org/pod. And from there, you have the roadmap. You have what Sean has learned all of these years about thinking really big and being a part of something really awesome. And Sean, I want to thank you so much for taking the time. I hope you had fun today.
This is the best, man. It's my own house. I'm sitting in my bare feet looking out at these mountains around me and talking about these concepts with someone like you. It's a pleasure and a privilege to do it. I really appreciate being asked on here.
Thanks for listening to the Rewilding Earth podcast. We do what we do because of you. This podcast is supported by listeners like you who long to live in a wilder world. Please consider donating at rewilding.org and subscribe to our weekly news and article digest while you're there. To go the extra mile, you can follow and share Rewilding Earth on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Bonus points for sharing this podcast with your friends. To listen to past episodes, go to rewilding.org/pod. That's rewilding.org/pod.